This album to me starts their epic run that made them the greatest artist, group, band of all time. What's up, everyone? This is Tatum. I'm back with another episode of Off the Wall. For those that's new to my channel, this is my segment where I like to go through some of my favorite records that I have in my collection, vinyls that is, and just express what they mean to me and why they're in my collection. So today, this is kind of sad as well because it's probably my last video album wise discussing this band or group, artist, however you want to go about it. And they're obviously one of my favorites. If you looked at my page and seen all the other reviews I did on them, I'll put them up here somewhere. And this record is special because it's the changing point in music. It's before this and then there's after this. So without further ado, today I'm going to be talking about the Beatles, Rubber Soul. This is so cool because this is like the review that I'm going to talk about is different from the one that I actually have. This record that I have is actually, I think it's the US version. So the first song is You've Just Seen a Face. So it's missing like Drive My Car, things of that nature. But when I get vinyls when I try to get the classic vinyls of like albums that came out in the 80s, 70s, 60s or whatever, or what have you, I try to get the vinyls that actually came out in that time period. If I can't find it, I'll get newer pressed up versions, but they miss like a certain authenticness to me. And some of them are so jacked up overpriced when they re-released that it's like hell for the fan or the consumer. So I'm like an eBay king with that. This one is actually from the actual 60s. So this is pretty cool. I don't want to take it out the plastic because it might rip apart. Also, something really cool that was in it was this like Join the Teen set on Capitol. And it was just like I would assume like a fan list for Capitol Records. So you got the Beatles on here, the Beatles second album, Beach Boys is on here, Nat King Cole's on here. Crazy. So this was in it as well. So I'm going to put this record down. I'm going to talk about some of my favorite records on here, some things I didn't like, and just talk about what this record means to me and music culture. So let's get into it. Now, before we start, remember to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. The road to 1,000 still continues. We're almost there. We're only 100 odd subscribers off from reaching that goal. That's one of my few goals I set for my channel is to reach 1,000. I think that's for every YouTube creator. So if you can help me out, if you like what you see, tell a friend to tell a friend, and you also hit that subscribe button. Now let's get back to the show. Like I said, Rubber Soul was the changing point in music from what stuff that I can conjure up from research. Obviously, I was born in 1990. I can't say that full confidently. I'm just going off history. So from what I read, it made it seem like this was the first pop album that kind of like not only just talked about liking he or she, you know what I mean? Like a lot of songs back then were just strict love records. They were straight to the point. There was no real thought of like, I wouldn't say real thought put into them, but it wasn't like let's talk about, like on Revolver, he has a song about like a whole conversation. She says, I know what it's like to be dead. Like those type of songs didn't exist yet. You know what I mean? And they say that this was the album that kind of changed that. If you're a Beatles fan or just a music fan that was around in those times and know a little bit more about how it was when this record dropped, let me know in the comments, please. And this is the second Beatles album where I believe they started writing. Well, not started writing. I'm pretty sure they were writing before this, but they artistically were more involved in the projects from this point on, from Help to Rubber Soul to Revolver to on and on and on. This album to me starts their epic run that made them the greatest artist, group, band of all time. What I really love about this album, really, and this is funny, but because I'm a big McCartney fan, but what I really love about this album is John. I love all the John records. You could just tell it was just something different. Paul McCartney on this album, his songs where he's singing lead for the most part, they were honest, but they were also dictating. There was a depiction of his life at the time. He was dating someone. They were going through a rough patch, and you could tell how that reflected and bled into the music itself. You Won't See Me and I'm Looking Through You are directly related to Paul McCartney's relationship that he was having at the time, woes. And I think like to start it off with Baby You Could Drive My Car, and this album came after, they did that strenuous tour. They went to the US. This is 2 years in a Beatlemania, I believe. And, they were always inspired by American music. but they once they got to the States, they can actually feel it. They can actually turn the radio dial and hear exactly what American music was and be in the environment where it was created. You know what I mean? So that added a whole nother layer to their music. And I think Baby Won't You Drive My Car is one of those records where you can hear the American influence on it. You can hear the Motown. I love how they just, well, in this version at least, how it starts with Baby, you can drive my car, and tells the story of that woman who, I won't say gold digger, but a woman searching for stardom and fame. And it also can have actual, a lot of, you can take it as a bunch of sexual innuendos, like, baby, you can drive my car, I promise you're gonna be a star, and maybe I love you, like, you know, those things. Like, you could take it as that. And I think these type of songs, I wonder how people felt when they first heard it, like, wait, this ain't the regular, even though that one's close to it, close enough to the sound, it's kind of like, okay, this is different. Then to go into Norwegian Wood with John Lennon, I would assume while he was in the States and with a woman who wasn't his wife at the time. She told me to have a seat. She told me to sit. I could sit anywhere, but then I looked around. I noticed there wasn't a chair. So he sat on the rug and by the fire, and he's telling you this whole story and this reality, and you could just put yourself right in that. You could put yourself right in that scene, even as he talks about, so I crawled up and laid in the bath. I went to sleep in the bath. Like, you can imagine all that, and you could tell that these artists were going through a whole different change. Obviously, this album introduced, John would say, it's the weed album because that's when they got introduced to weed, but they also were experimenting with LSD and things of that nature, and McCartney was like the only one hesitant on it, and it kind of created a rift between the band, which I read. You could just don't have to take my word on it. He's a real nowhere man. That is John Lennon's Pocket. Songs about self, songs about him, but it shows you the mindset, the mind state he's in. He's a married man. He's in the Beatles. The height is everywhere. He's the biggest of the biggest, right? And he's creating songs like he's a real nowhere man. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of in the vein of those Help kind of records and just self-loathing kind of records that we get from John along the way. Think for yourself. George Harrison always comes in with the introspective songs, like on every album. I feel like that's his cue. Like, George, get it in. I know you got one. Let's get it. If you haven't already, you can also check out my review on George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. I'll put the link up here somewhere, which is probably one of my favorite post-Beatles albums. The word is love. It's the word I'm thinking of. Like, you know, it's so fine, it's sunshine. Like, they were adding so many textures and layers into those records that now it seems simple, obviously, right? But back then, it's so many influences with it woved into these one records that's only about 2 minutes and 20 seconds max. Which one thing I thought was so fucking amazing, part of my French, part of my language, but I always thought that was very great about the Beatles is that they were able to make such great records in a short amount of time. And I mean, like, literally minutes. You know, imagine how many great Beatle records are under 3 minutes. Michel Mabel, and I just finished watching the Hulu doc with Paul McCartney. You should check it out. And he was talking about the creation of that song and how the process it took to create it. And just to think, man, these guys are so amazing, the way that their songwriting and songs came about. When you hear these stories, like Yesterday, when he had the idea, scrambled eggs, like, and that he held on that idea for a long time, and he held on to the idea of Michelle for a long time, and then it became as big as it became. It's just magic. What Goes On, that's the Ringo song. For everybody who already seen all of my Beatles videos, you know how I feel about Ringo records. They just don't cut it for me. I just can't do his voice. Even though this is one of the records, probably the only record that is credited to Lennon, McCartney, and Ringo, which is, I guess that's an honor in itself. Girl is probably one of my favorite Beatles records of all time. I read somewhere that was like John's response to Michelle. The way that song comes on, that had to take people back when it first came out. Like, it's no build up. It just drops right in. Is there anybody going to listen to my... He just falls right into you got to catch yourself. Like, wait, what's going on here? Like, I can imagine how progressive, for lack of better words, that was back then. John Lennon was just a beast, man. And then the hook is so trance-like. In My Life is probably one of my favorite Beatles records as well. Just that John Lennon's vocals, the story on there, the introspectiveness of like life. That bridge on there where it goes. That part, excuse me as I fan out, but that part is just, I remember when I first heard that as a teen and it like blew my fucking mind, and that was still in the 2000s. So I'm like, I can imagine like the run that they went on Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sergeant. Jesus Christ. They started a cappella again. It's been a long time now, I'm coming back home. It's the melody on If I Needed Someone is A1, and I think that melody's probably been taken so many different times throughout the course of music. Dun, 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 dun. That melody's been taken. If I Needed Someone, that melody is just gold. The album ends with Run For Your Life, and to me, that record is kind of a letdown closer for me on a classic album. It doesn't take anything away from the album. Even John Lennon says he doesn't like this song. It's just, I don't know, it could have been another song to close it, but they came back with Revolver, so it doesn't matter at this point. Let me get into my best songs. I'm going to go with Girl, In My Life, and Norwegian Wood. All John Lennon songs. He killed it. And for the most part, like, I was reading, I believe it was Nowhere Man, where he said he was down about not being able to write a record, and then when he stopped thinking about it, the record just came to him. That's how genius and magic John Lennon and Paul McCartney were. Worst song, What Goes On. Best line, was she told when she was young that pain would lead to pleasure? Did she understand when they said that the man must break his back to earn his day of leisure? Will she still believe when he's dead? That line is just so dope. It's nothing else I can say. That line is just dope. Let's wrap this shit up though. In closing, when it comes to the Beatles Rubber Soul, it's nothing I can say at this point. I'm just happy to have it in my collection. This was obviously an album that changed music. Period. Like, anybody who tells you otherwise, they just don't know or just ignorant. Like, this, it changed everything. This album changed songs from just being "Girl, I love you," "Boy, I love you" kind of thing to more introspective songs, and on a big level though. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure it was artists doing this. I'm not gonna like discredit anyone, but this album changed everything. Go online, just Google Rubber Soul influence, and look at all the artists who looked at this album in that time, after this time, that were inspired by it, and just look what they say about it. And for them to go on the run that they went on after this album, like they went Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper, The White Album, Abbey Road, Let It Be, and then bounced. They bounced. They broke up. It was over. Like, they gave us the shortest run of greatest music you can imagine in a short amount of time, and this was the beginning. So I'm glad to have it in my collection. I'm glad you're sitting here fanning out with me. If you got any comments, leave them below. Let me know, what's your favorite Beatles album? Where's Rubber Soul rank in the Beatles discography to you? Give me your top 3 Beatles, and give me what's some of your favorite records off here as well. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. It's time to put this record back on my wall. I'm Tatum. Peace.